Hey Ravi,
How are you doing?
very good. Now I've slept, thank you.
So, Ram, tell us more about yourself.
So, I've always had an IT passion for many years. That started back in 1998, I think it was, maybe even 96. So when I was about six, maybe, yeah, six goes about right. This is probably the dawn of Napster. So I was quite drawn in at a very early age of getting music very cheaply and very free, but using dial-up and waiting years for it to download, or at least it felt like it back then. And I was introduced to that by my mum's best friend's son, who was like 7 years older than me. So he was 15 or something at the time. So that was the introduction into IT at a very early age. And for years and years after that, I kept pestering my mum, get me a computer of my own, so that if I break it, I'm not stopping you from working. That didn't happen until I moved out at 16. So I got into a bit of trouble at school of being the naughty one that locked the network admin out constantly. And got a reputation, as it were. I then, when I left school, went and did an apprenticeship, an unpaid apprenticeship, for a company called Xenos IT in Telford in the UK. And what they were looking to do is get people trained up into the MCSE for Server 2003. I managed to sit one exam, well, 3 exams, but one of them wasn't worth sitting. And I came out with IC3 certification, which nobody in the world recognises, so that was a waste of me sitting it. But then I also sat the 70-270 exam, troubleshooting Windows XP. And I was unfortunate and not able to sit this 271 exam because I wasn't very well, and then never really got back to it. And then didn't do IT for a number of years, like 7 years, until I actually got back into IT. And also I've been quite young. I had family young, so that took a lot of time. Couldn't get into IT with my experience in the town that I was in, or even local towns. And found as soon as I was able to drive, that made things a lot easier, so I could start reaching out a lot further afield. I first got into IT by doing an apprenticeship at Barclays, which was a 60-mile drive every day each way, so that was an hour and a half of journeying each way just to get to work. And it was in the middle of nowhere, so I had to have a car. I couldn't get on the train or anything at all. But I was lucky there was a few other guys travelling from my town, so we car shared for nearly 18 months, so allowed me to sleep in the car on the way to work most days.
So, you work at University of Manchester, right?
Yeah.
So what do you do there?
So, I was lucky when I got thrown into IT at Barclays. It was into SharePoint, and Barclays had quite a big implementation of SharePoint, so I learned quite a lot very quickly about how SharePoint works, inner workings as well. So when time came that I was not particularly happy working there, I wanted a bit more challenge. I moved to the University of Manchester to start doing what I thought was going to be a lot more work with more of the infrastructure side of SharePoint. That hasn't come to fruition at the moment, unfortunately, due to internal policies. That was always the case. But I do a lot of work with understanding what people are currently doing. Most of it seems to be very low-level document sharing. So we do a lot of very basic team sites. We don't do a lot of customization to them at all. But we do have a lot of legacy systems that we're trying to pull stuff out from. And the guy that used to support them has left the university now, so it's now me supporting a legacy system, which is all fun because it should have been retired before I even joined, but that hasn't happened. And that's a legacy document management system, so it's fun work.
So how did you get started with PowerShell?
I was frustrated with one of the tasks that I used to do at Barclays, which was we had an internal social network on SharePoint that used a third-party application as well installed on top of SharePoint. And one of the things that we had an issue with was people's data. So quite regularly, the way that we had something coded by the development team was that it would pull back the information based on a unique ID, so an employee number that we were using. However, the problem was that if you typed in your employee number and then your date of birth, there was no check to make sure that that date of birth was correct, because it's not stored in any corporate systems. So it would then write that that date of birth was being used for that account, and then when people were trying to, the actual person was trying to do it, they would find that they couldn't log in properly, which then meant we had to do what was a 2-minute fix every day for about 20 or 30 users a day. So once you're doing that sort of level fix, it gets really, really annoying and really, really repetitive. So I went out and I went to speak to the people that were dealing with the other database systems, get to understand what their problems were, so I can understand what my problem was at the heart of it. And then it was kind of, right, okay, so how can I script this? And luckily one of the guys in the infrastructure team for SharePoint sat opposite me, and he loves using PowerShell. So I ended up saying, right, can we write something in PowerShell to do this? And that's what started it all off. I then kind of got jumped into the fact that with SharePoint you can do a lot of stuff with PowerShell from your client machine. You don't have to have access to a server. So I've done a lot more work with client-side object model than I have done with server-side PowerShell, including doing a lot of work with a set of modules that now the Office Dev PMP team are doing quite a lot of work with it.
Right. So you seem to have a good number of years with PowerShell. So what are some of the things that are really annoying with PowerShell?
Oh, I would say it's less a case of things that are annoying with PowerShell. It's things that are annoying with SharePoint with PowerShell. And that's because SharePoint seems to be the application that doesn't seem to conform to anything. Every single time I try to do something with, no matter whether it's one machine, another machine, a completely fresh install, there seems to be issues, and it's a nightmare sometimes trying to understand why you've got this one issue on one machine and not another. I'm still in the process of trying to understand how I can slowly get around that, but I think after this weekend especially, I'll get better. Now I've had a chance to sort of, for want of a better word, pester some other people.
Okay, so we talked about something that you probably are annoyed with, but what is that one feature that you like the most?
I'm still getting to grips with how many features there are. I think one of the things that I see is underutilized, but I can see a lot of benefit in using, would be PowerShell workflows. I continuously try to find somewhere that I can make use of them, and then continuously find that actually there is pretty much nowhere I can make use of them.
That's the reality.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, there's probably ways I can use it with data imports into SharePoint. I just need to get to that point where I'm happy to try doing it with dummy data. So hopefully I'll get there soon enough.
Good. So in your experience and whatever you've learned, the way you learn PowerShell, for those people who are getting started with PowerShell, what is your input?
So the first thing I did with PowerShell was, it was nothing to do with SharePoint. It was, I was frustrated that I had a set of shortcuts on my desktop for opening up remote desktop in a different user, so not remote desktop, sorry, remote assistance as a different user, because of the amount of different domains that I was working with. So I had different domain accounts that some could connect straight away, some couldn't, some you needed to be elevated. The joys of working in an enterprise as big as Barclays, there's no one standard, there's 330 standards. So it was trying to help my team get that same sort of level of ability, but without having to say, right, let me come and sit down and manually create all of these. There was only like 5 applications I wanted to do it with, but I think I spent about a week on it and gave up and moved on to something different. And then I think the big one that sort of really took off with it for me was there was a tweet that was sent a good while back about a load of free PDFs that were coming from Microsoft, and I was like, I ain't clicking through all of these and downloading them one by one. And luckily for me, at Barclays we had a PFE who had some spare time, and he sat down with me and we worked out line by line how to go out and do that. I've amended and adapted that script about 3 times since, especially for stuff that is now broken, so broken links that no longer point to the URLs. But that was my first proper integration with using PowerShell for something that was easy.
All right. So you came all the way from UK to attend PowerShell Conference in Asia.
Yeah.
What's your experience here?
I really liked it here. I've liked it that much that I'm already planning coming back, just not sure how long away until I come back. The bit for me is that this is a very different environment to the UK. The UK seems to be very tight-knit. It's also very cold and very wet and rains all the time. And I think I'm a bit more suited to seeing some sun, to be honest.
That's nice. Thanks for taking your time and talking to us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.